It is this meeting of the Technical Review Committee of the Town of Estes Park to order. It is 11:02 on Thursday, July 7th. Just before we start, since this is a Zoom webinar, anybody who would wish to speak when we open public comment periods, either for the agenda as a whole or for a particular item, should click the raise hand button if they're on the web, or press 9 if joining by telephone. Once you are announced by the clerk of the meeting, please state your name and address for the record. With that, the first item on our agenda today is the agenda approval. You have the agenda in front of you. I would take any additions at this point. Any additions, edits from the Technical Review Committee? Anything from staff? Anything from the public? All right, seeing nothing, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved. Mike Wisniewski.
Second, Rob.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Mahalik,
Aye.
Member Gagnon,
Aye.
Member Hinkle,
Aye.
Member Mahonen, is he, did he say aye? And Member Wisniewski.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0, that passes.
One moment, I think we may have lost Greg off the call. I don't see him on there. Let me see if he's having technical difficulties. 1 second, please. Okay, Greg's an attendee. If we could promote him to panelist, we can move forward with the meeting. Thank you. We'll deal with that. All right. False start. Can we, Recording Secretary Swanland, can we run that vote back just to make sure we get everybody? I was an aye.
Yep, Member Gagnon.
Aye.
Member Hinkle. Member Mahonen.
Please forgive me. What are we voting on?
All right, we're going to run back to the motion. So the motion was made by Member Wisniewski to approve the agenda. Member Hinkle seconded the motion. So we're voting on the agenda approval, right?
Thank you. I vote aye.
Okay, and Member Wisniewski.
Aye.
All right, on to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a comment on an item that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand now. Again, you can do that by clicking raise hand in the Zoom client or by pressing *9 if you're on the phone. Recording Secretary Swanland, do we have anyone wishing to make a public comment on items not on the agenda?
I do not have anybody wishing to make a comment.
Thank you. We will move to the consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda today, and that's the Technical Review Committee minutes dated August 27th, 2021. I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve move to accept as presented. Mike Wisniewski.
I will approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Recording Secretary Swanland, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Mahalik,
Aye.
Member Gagnon,
Aye.
Member Hinkle,
Aye.
Member Mahonin,
Aye.
and Member Wisniewski.
Aye.
And that passes 5-0.
Thank you. On to our action items. The first action item we have today is a Stanley Film Center modification. Senior Planner Wober, we'll start with the staff report. Senior Planner Wober, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I hit it twice. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jeffrey Wober, planner with the Town of Estes Park. I think I'm getting fairly well up to speed on the way the TRC and the Stanley Master Plan and all that works. It takes a little bit of getting used to. I've listened in on a couple meetings, but today I'm presenting the two agenda items. I should add, as an aside, that if you hear any sort of shrieking and whistling in the background, it's not a mentally ill housemate or anything. It's a parrot, and he's off in the distance, so he's not too disruptive, but it is a little strange. He's being quiet now. But on to the agenda item. This is a modification or amendment to the approved final plans, and let me start by sharing my screen here. This one, okay. I'm kind of fumbling with my mouse a little bit today, so. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes.
So this is a modification or amendment to the approved final plans for the Stanley Film Center. The committee is familiar with the project. It went through a TRC review and approval about 1 year ago, with the final plans approved in September 2021. The first slide here is just the general overview of the site plan. It's from the final package, the final plan approval, to give you an idea of the layout of the film center. The approved plans have an area on level 1 that's currently designated as storage engineering support, which would be instead used to maximize first the cultural arts use area. That's how it's defined in the master plan, where the master plan allows a maximum of 40,000 square feet. The applicant would be adding 1,740 square feet to that use classification, bringing it up to the maximum 40,000 on level 1. Similarly, with the conference center use, they'd bring up to the maximum of 25,000 by adding 2,490 square feet to the first level conference center use. The square footage that's removed from level 1, currently for engineering support storage, would be shifted or relocated to the lower basement level. With that relocation, the applicant also proposes adding an additional 5,578 square feet to the engineering support use, all to be in the lower basement level, for a total additional 9,808 square feet. The engineering support use would now total 24,700 square feet. The engineering support use was previously determined to be an accessory use as defined in the Estes Park Development Code. So that's really the kind of the general idea of it. I'll let Mr. Musso, the applicant's representative architect, go into maybe some more detail on the specifics of the conference center on the first level and the cultural arts, etc. But that's kind of an overview of what they're doing. The applicant has stated that the visitor numbers would not increase with the additional square footage. The proposed square footage increases would improve circulation within the facility, improve the museum area, and add area for storage and maintenance, which is very limited at the Stanley. So I think as far as impacts, you know, it may actually kind of reduce some of the comings and goings from the engineering support staff now if they had some more on-site facilities. That's just kind of an aside. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the amendment, the revisions to the final plan. There are some advantages that have been identified. It provides additional area and functionality for the Stanley Film Center, with any potential impacts minimized by being below ground level. You know, the footprint height of the existing approved structure would not change. This would be in the basement level. Secondly, the film center proposal, including the modifications requested, aligns with the 94 Stanley Historic District Master Plan. Third, the proposed development is attractive, complements other development on the Stanley site and in the town, and will contribute to the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the community as a whole. The one disadvantage identified is the impacts to the Stanley area from the construction project may be just very slightly increased with the additional floor area. I should add the Stanley, lot 1 of the Stanley is 34 1/3 acres in size, so that, you know, this is a sizable project. The Stanley is a large facility, and you know, the 34 1/3 acres equates to about 1.5 million square feet. So the square footages for this type of thing don't seem out of line at all. And as I said, staff is recommending approval of this. There's actually a resolution of approval that's included with your staff report and packet. So with that, that's kind of my presentation. I can answer any questions now, or we can let Mr. Musso give his input and then answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senior Planner Wober. Any questions for Senior Planner Wober specifically about those items before we hear from Mr. Musso and then have an opportunity for more broad questions? All right, Mr. Musso, let's hear from you, and then we will go from there.
Thank you very much. If you could allow me to share the screen, please, I'll pull up some graphics as well.
Senior Planner Wober, you'll need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, there we go. All right, hopefully you can see my screen now. Great. Thanks for having us today. Thank you, TRC committee members. We appreciate your time. We understand several of you do this on a volunteer basis, and we very much appreciate your willingness to participate in the public process. Mr. Wober did a very great job of outlining our request for the Stanley Film Center. I'll try to be brief here, but also reinforce some of the comments and basis for the request as identified by Mr. Wober. The first and foremost, the square footage request that we are asking for, the 9,800, I think 9,808 square feet, will all be located in the basement of the Stanley Film Center, and I'll show graphics of that in a moment. It will not be a visible component of the development of the film center. None of this square footage that we're requesting occurs at or above grade. The reasons behind the request for the additional area are inclusive of, one, maximizing the allowed area through the Stanley Historic District Master Plan for the conference use as well as the cultural arts use. As Mr. Wober pointed out, we're several thousand square feet under those allowances currently. This would bring the program area up to those maximum allowable areas as identified in the Stanley Historic District Master Plan. The reason for the asked increase in those two areas is due to the type of technology that the Stanley Film Center will incorporate for its exhibits and immersive programs. As we're digging deeper into the programming and design of the film center and working with the exhibit designers, we're finding that the types of exhibits and programs require a lot more back of house technology and support to operate the types of exhibits that will take place in the cultural arts and conference areas. That is why the visitation numbers won't necessarily increase. We're not looking at increasing visitation. We're looking at adding space that will allow the proper technology to help support the exhibit spaces within the building. The back of house and engineering and storage needs is a desire to keep any engineering services off of the exterior site of the building. As you can imagine, a complex of 60 plus acres, when you look at all the different components of the Stanley campus, require an extensive engineering support to maintain both buildings and grounds. Right now, we are estimating that we're going to be overtaxed with the area currently dedicated to engineering in the film center as currently approved. And what that would end up resulting in is, in all likelihood, the need to store some elements or equipment, landscaping equipment, et cetera, on site, exposed to our surrounding neighbors. We would like to eliminate that, and with the additional engineering support requested, be able to bring those components undercover in the basement of the building and other areas of the building, so that we are not providing unnecessarily unsightly elements to help support the upkeep of the Stanley. I'm going to move to my next page here. As Mr. Warber pointed out, we're looking at kind of a series of area requests here. The first one, request number 1, is on the cultural arts use. That's 1,740 square feet. That would bring us up to that approval or approved square footage of 40,000. On the right-hand side, you can see a building area takeoff. And in the blue column is the tabulation of the building components that add up to that 40,000 square feet. The second request is on the conference use side. That's a request for 2,490 square feet, bringing us up to 25,000 square feet. Again, the takeoff on the building tabulates those components of the building that add into that square footage. And then, as Mr. Warber said, the engineering and support use do not have a maximum square footage associated with them within the Stanley Historic District Master Plan. So there is no maximum for that component of the building. We are asking for a total increase of about 5,600 square feet to add to the engineering and support functions of the building to, again, as I described, better provide for the needs for both building maintenance and site maintenance and keep it out of sight. This is a side-by-side graphic of, on the left-hand side, the currently approved TRC floor plan. This was the floor plan approved approximately 1 year ago on the left. On the right is the additional area in yellow that we're looking to add on the basement level in this request. So all 9,808 square feet would be added at this level, again, completely out of sight, buried approximately 20 to 40 feet below grade, depending on which end of the slope of the site you're on. As Mr. Warber pointed out, this additional square footage will result in some shifting of square footage space on the first level. So some of our square footage on the first level that is currently identified for engineering and support would move down to the basement level that I just shared with you. And those cultural arts and conference uses square footage that we're asking for would then take its place on this level. There is no change in square footage at this level 1 of the building. There's no change in the shape or outline of the footprint of the building at this level. Level 2, there is absolutely no change at level 2 from the previously approved TRC floor plans. And at level 3, again, there is absolutely no change requested at this level of the building. These are side-by-side comparisons of the programs. These are in your packet. So it's a lot of detailed information that results in the tabulation of the square footage and where it's associated and the uses that it's associated with. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Moshalak, and open it up to questions if anybody has them for me as well.
Thank you, Mr. Musso. Any questions from members of the TRC?
Can you go back to the side-by-side first floor plan?
Sure. Give me 1 second. There we are. Is this the one you're after, Mr. Gagnon?
Yep, yep. So your stairs shifted a little bit. Did you add a stair that goes down into the basement for egress down there?
Yes, we did. You're talking about the stair right here.
Correct, correct.
Yes, we did add that for egress. It does not take any more square footage or increase the footprint of this level. We just shifted some of the internal square footage to
Got it.
provide that. Yeah.
Okay.
Good catch.
I just wanted to verify that because it's the same number of stairs, it's just in different locations, so.
Correct. Yeah. With the repositioning of square footage in the basement, we needed to move that stair to accommodate exiting requirements.
Got it. That will shift a couple of exterior doors, correct? On that, that southern face of the building?
Yes, ever so slightly, yes.
Okay,
Along this southern face right in here. You can see we've got some, what I believe are conference spaces. Those door locations shift a little bit, although it's the same number of doors, same basic location on the building.
got it. Okay,
Same function.
okay, thanks.
Any other questions I can help clarify for anybody?
I've got one, Mr. Musso. It's
Yes.
sort of an outgrowth of a conversation we had last time. I'm actually not seeing any changes on these floor plans beyond just some, so if we look at the, level 1 floor plan, that's where you're on. Area increase request. It doesn't look like there's any changes from, the only change I see from the TRC approved building floor plans is the film center storage, that little bar right above the red squiggly line there, transition to film museum expansion. But everything else, I'm not seeing the, the whatever it is, the 1740 and the 2490 reallocation shown on the new floor plan. I don't understand where the new space is coming from on the new floor plan.
Yeah, it would be, if you can see my mouse,
Yep, I can.
it would be in this area of the building. We have not done a final plan for how that, the square footage that would be placed in this area would ultimately lay out until we have worked far enough along with our exhibit designers to understand their individual room needs and space needs. But that relocation of area would occur right in this space or portion of this space.
Okay, so
Again, it would not increase the exterior or the footprint of the building at this level. It would simply be the delineation of rooms within this area associated with those two uses.
I think I understand now. So in the previous iteration, it was called out as storage and not film space and counted as storage in the.
Correct.
Okay, so the request basically then is to take a portion of that storage space, reallocate it to the lower floor and max out the allowable conference and film center uses.
You are correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Other questions from TRC members before we go to public comment? All right, with that up, I am seeing actually a staff member attendee, Mr. Rush. Recording Secretary Swanland, could we promote Mr. Rush just to make sure that there's not a staff question here before we move to public comment?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Musso, I think you have done a good job explaining it, but I just want to make absolute sure I'm not going to miss anything.
Sure.
If I were to look at this project from a profile perspective versus the plan view, the subterranean basement will still not exit the boundaries of the above grade structure, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make absolute sure I didn't overlook something.
Yeah, you can see I went to the basement level floor plans. So on the left is the currently approved TRC floor plan. And you can see with the dash line, the
Mhm.
building footprint above. The yellow area is all underneath that established building footprint.
Perfect, thank you.
So we're not again pushing out beyond the current boundaries of the established footprint of the building.
Thank you for clarifying. I gathered that, but yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, just when I read about the increased connectivity between the buildings, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything there, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other question, anything else from staff or the applicant before we head to public comment? All right, we will.
Travis, you are on mute.
Just when you think you're done with these. Sorry. That's good because I was stumbling along with my words and now we can be more in line. So we are going to move to the public comment portion of this agenda item. So if members of the public have comments about this item, please raise your hand now using the Zoom raise hand option. If you're on the telephone, you can use *9. When you're announced, please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes to make your comment. Give people a minute to raise their hands. Recording Secretary Swanland, do we have anyone wishing to make a public comment?
I do not see anybody. No phone calls, no emails, no hands.
Thank you. So we will close the public comment period and move on to final discussion and action. Does anybody on the TRC have any additional questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion at this time. You can find a recommended motion in your packet, and Just a reminder that we are voting on, there's a resolution in front of you, TRC Resolution 01-22.
This is Mike Wisniewski. I move that we accept TRC Resolution 01-22 as presented in our packet, unless you'd like me to read more of what's in our packet.
Member Wisniewski, I'm assuming by accept you mean approve. I want to make sure.
I'm sorry, approve. Yes, thank you.
So the motion is a move to approve the TRC Resolution 01-22.
I will second the motion.
Motion has been seconded by Member Gagnon. And Recording Secretary Swanland, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Mahalik,
Aye.
Member Gagnon,
Aye.
Member Hinkle,
Aye.
Member Mahonen,
Aye.
and Member Wisniewski.
Aye.
That passes 5-0.
Travis, you're on mute again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Community Development Director Gardner. Moving on, our next action item is amended plat, the Overlook Condominiums. Senior Planner Wober will have the staff report to start.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a request for an amended plat to change 6 lots on the Overlook Condominiums plat that are currently designated as single family envelopes to duplexes. And let me once again share my screen here. Oh, apologize, I'm fumbling with my mouse today. Let's see. Come on now. There we go. Oops. Okay, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So it's a pretty simple request. We have on the Overlook Condominiums plat, there's currently 6 single family envelopes that they would be converting to duplexes. Of course, the devil's kind of in the details. So to give just a real brief background of the plat for lot 2, this is from the mid-90s Stanley master plan. And, you know, they've got all this vegetation, trees and rock outcroppings on here. Makes it very busy to make much sense of, but you can see the lot 2 delineated up here at the north of the hotel facilities. And back then it was designated as accommodations or residential. So then I should add the location or size of the lots or envelopes would not change. They're simply increasing the 6 units from the existing 6 to 12 units. So in 2003, this next slide is when they platted lots 1 and 2, with lot 2 up here to the north again being 9.68 acres. And around the same time, they approved and recorded the Overlook Condominiums. So the Overlook Condominiums has 46 units total, and that's a mixture of multifamily down here to the south and duplexes, and then the 6 subject lots, the single family envelopes over here to the west. These plats did require town board approval. It wasn't real clear what process they went through back in 2003 with the TRC. Some of our files from back then are a little shaky, but I did find that they went through a town board approval, and I believe they went through the TRC process as well. They definitely did a development plan for lot 2. So finally, we are left with the final piece of this, which was not last July, in July of 2020, Lot 2, the 9.68 acres was split into Lot 2A and 2B. So we have Lot 2A over here on the west, and that has the six single family lots are entirely now on Lot 2A, and the remainder are on Lot 2B. All of the other units that were platted on the Overlook condos on Lot 2B are developed. The 6 single family are still vacant ground. They have not been developed. So what we would do, depending on the TRC's action today, is do an amended plat of Lot 2A, including those six single family lots, and just designate them as duplexes, and then they would show kind of a graphic of the floor plan and the footprint of those duplex buildings. They would remain kind of as is, except they would be changed to duplexes. So the density, or the maximum allowable development, as it's called in the master plan, that sort of begins with up here, and I know this is a little hard to read, with a kind of a base density, I'll call it, of 46 residential dwelling units, and then we have 92 accommodations units, and then they have a square footage for the accommodations units not to exceed 75,000 square feet. Now, if you have a mixed residential and accommodations use, and this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing. We have a breakdown where you have to make changes to those, the 92 and the 46. And you know, this is a piece of this that we were still having some back and forth, Mr. Musso and myself. But we do have a pretty good handle on it now. You should have been emailed Mr. Musso's calculations and et cetera that spell out this this density and square footage. Basically, I'm trying to kind of distill it down here in the simplest of terms. So we have the 46 residential, the 92 accommodations units, and the 75,000 square feet. With the maximum allowable development in the master plan, it requires, where there's mixed residential accommodations, for each residential unit, it reduces the number of accommodations units by 2. Each 2 accommodations units reduces the number of residential units by 1. And then each residential unit reduces the allowable square footage of accommodations by 1,250 square feet. So with that, we have existing currently 8 residential units. That reduces the accommodations by 16, so 76 remaining. The 44 accommodations units reduces the residential units by 22, so we have 24 remaining. So we have quite a few units remaining. The sort of the sticking point in this becomes the 8 existing residential units reduces the accommodations square footage by 10,000. So that's 8 times the 1250 is 10,000. So we take that 75,000 square feet that's allowed and reduce it, leaving us with 65,000. Now, with the duplexes they're proposing, with the existing accommodations, and then the fact that the duplexes would be accommodations, we get up to 66,776 square feet. So this is the existing accommodations plus the 12 duplex units, which total 25,200 square feet, being proposed on the amended plats. Now that exceeds the maximum 65,000 by 1,776 square feet. So we're not adding any density over what's allowable, but the square footage, it calculates out to a 3% increase in the accommodation square footage. The development agreement for lot 2, which was processed and approved back in the mid-90s with the master plan, has a provision for a staff level minor amendment. Our development code, the Estes Park Development Code, also has a provision for a staff level minor modification up to 10%. So staff has taken a look at this and finds that the 3% to be reasonable, and that's probably something that we can support. I can add that if there does seem to be some issue with that 3%, 1776 square foot modification, that they do have some other possible alternatives, some other options, the applicant. But for now, we're going to say that they would be looking at the 66,776 square feet of accommodation square footage. So with that, we've identified some advantages. Again, this provides 6 additional units at the Overlook area of the Stanley. The infrastructure on Lot 2 is largely in place, and the amended plat proposal aligns with the 1994 Stanley Historic District Master Plan. Disadvantages, the impacts to the Stanley area from the construction project may be very slightly increased. And with the 6 additional units, there would be a slight increase in traffic in the area. And again, I'm going to rely on Mr. Musso to go over his calculations and so forth a little bit more in depth. I've reviewed them; they seem reasonable to me, but certainly the TRC can ask some questions of Mr. Musso on that. The action recommended is that staff recommends the TRC forward a recommendation of approval of the amended plat of the Overlook Condominiums to change the 6 lots designated as single family to duplex. Now, there may be a slight discrepancy in that, and any motion you might make. Town Attorney Dan Kramer has said that it may be that we're not necessarily making a recommendation, but actually more of an approval. So as I said before, this requires a town board approval as well. And typically with the Planning Commission, we would get a recommendation from them, but it may be that this requires a formal approval by the TRC and an approval by the town board. So just to make it more confusing. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward as I can make it. And with that, again, I can try and answer any questions now, or we can get Mr. Musso's input and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Planner Wober. Unless there's a specific question for Senior Planner Wober, we could take, yes, Mr. Member Wisniewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand what an accommodation unit is versus a residential, but how does the city differentiate or understand that one of the existing properties is an accommodation property versus a residential property?
Well, basically, we're kind of relying on the owner applicant to inform us which one of these are, either just owner occupied where they don't use them for, the short term, which is less than 30 days rental, typically, overnight, that type of thing, or the accommodations, which can be rented as short-term rentals, we call them, for the less than 30 days. So I know that Mr. Musso had spoken to some people up there to get a good handle on which ones of those are which, and I can let him provide some input on his methodology for that, but that's kind of how it breaks down.
Okay, so we understand at the moment there are 8 permanent residents versus the remaining being the accommodation properties.
Yes, correct. That's as I understand it.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can add, Mr. Warber, to help answer Mr. Wisniewski's question. All of the units that are labeled as accommodations are in the Stanley Hotel, basically the rental pool is what we call it. So there aren't privately rented units in Lot 2. They all go through the Stanley. So there's one single source of the rental operations, and everything runs through the Stanley. That's how we have a really good understanding of what is accommodation versus what is residential.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So are there covenants then with the residential units that restrict an individual residential owner from doing their own VBRO, Airbnb, that might in the future distort some of the guidelines that are established? Oh, looks like Mr. Cullen's got a hand.
Let me jump in. Yes, there is an HOA regulation that the Stanley is the sole and exclusive operator, and it is a violation of the HOA covenants, and you don't want to do that as an individual owner, and that's a no-no. And furthermore, I do believe there's an inspection process that the town goes through when we go from residential to accommodations, and so the town actually has a list of those units that are actually rated for accommodation use.
Great, thank you very much.
Other questions before we turn it over to Mr. Musso? All right, Mr. Musso, you're up.
Thank you again. Let me pull my graphics up here again. There we go. Sorry, wrong project again. All right, you should see a graphic of lot 2 and a photo of aerial photo of lot 2 behind the hotel. So again, this is a fairly simple request, as Mr. Warber defined. The 6 lots that we're talking about are these 6 here. They are previously approved through TRC and previously platted. They were done so as single-family residences. We are simply looking to change that designation to paired duplex residences. The lot size would not change. The lot configuration for those 6 would not change, nor would the square footage that was allowed under the previous TRC, 4,200 square feet per single family residence. That would remain the same. Each half of a duplex would be 2,100 square feet, adding up to that previously approved 4,200 square feet. This is very redundant to what Mr. Warber showed you. It's just the excerpts out of the Historic District Master Plan by which we evaluate both the number of units for allowed units for residential and accommodations and the allowed square footage for accommodations. Again, we're not asking for a change in lot area. We're not asking for a change in building height, etc. Only in the designation from single family to duplex. The lots, as I said, were previously approved as single family, so this is a fairly minor change. Duplex units will occupy the same lot locations and configurations for these 6. They do not change the size of the approved lot, nor the size of the unit itself. On this graphic, you can see 3 different colors. The yellow are those units that currently are existing as accommodations units. The red are those that are existing as residential units. So you can see those 8. And then the new units are in blue. The new units would be classified as accommodations under this request. This is the previously approved plat. This is one of a compilation of drawings that are in your packet that go through the plat of the different buildings in lot 2. This is also the document that helps us identify the building area for each of the existing buildings as we made our calculations. On the lower right-hand side is a PDF of the spreadsheet we use to make the calculations. On this spreadsheet, we identify all the units. There are 40 existing units. So that is all of the yellow and all of the red units are in this part of the spreadsheet. We identify their type by 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. There is a mix depending on the unit itself. We identify the address number of each. We identify the square footage building area of each. And then we identify if that building area is in the accommodations category or the residential category. And again, so in the residential category, you can see we have 8 of them. They total, it's a little hard to see here, but just over 12,000 square feet. And I'll get to these numbers here in a minute. Our accommodations unit, just over 41,000 square feet. When we then look at the tabulation and include the 12 duplex units at 2,100 square feet each, that gives us then new totals for both the accommodations and residential categories. At the top of the sheet then, we've gone through each of the stipulations in the historic district master planning, basically the zoning stipulations for accommodation and residential when it's in a mixed situation like it is now in Lot 2. The first item that we needed to meet or need to meet is the total number of mixed residential and accommodation units shall not exceed 92. With the 12 duplex units, we end up with 52. So we're well under the maximum number. The second stipulation in a mixed development is the maximum number of accommodation units allowed. That is 76. Mr. Warber described the math a little bit. It's actually the 92 up here minus 16, which is the number of accommodation units allowed is reduced by 2. So that's the 16, 92 minus 16 equals 76. We have a total, we'll have a total of 44. So we're again, well under that number. In a mixed development, the number of residential units allowed changed to 24. It was 46 minus 22. That's the number of accommodation units divided in half. So 46 minus 22 equals 24 allowed residential units. We have 8 with the development. So again, we're well underneath that stipulation as well. And then the final one is the allowable square footage for accommodations. That started out as 75,000 square feet, but in a mixed situation, you reduce for every residential unit, you reduce 1,250 square feet off of that 75. So we've got 8 residential units, those are the 8 in red, times 1,250 equals 10,000. That reduces our 75,000 square feet down to 65,000. The 12 duplex units that we're asking to be reclassified add up with all of the rest of the units to 66,776. As Mr. Warber identified, that's 1,776 square feet above the allowable. That is the 3% that we are looking for a variance or a minor amendment to allow us to provide the units in this area of the site. I think that's the information that I can share with you. If you have any questions regarding the calculation methodology or the platting, I'd be happy to answer them.
Jack, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Looking at old plat and then the revised plat, there are some what look like utility easements running through the property.
Mm-hmm.
On the old plat, it looks like it runs through several units. and the, including these newer ones in the upper left-hand corner, has the new plat or the revised plat corrected that so that you don't have conflicts there?
Yes, I believe it has. And with the replatting, when we go to duplexes, if we're allowed to do that, we'll ensure that those easements do not encumber the development. But they've already been platted with that understanding and those removal.
Are those utility easements within the property, or are they from outside the property coming through it?
Let me jump in. That actually was abandoned back in 1999. No one's just gotten rid of them. And they run from the Stanley to the Ridgeview condominiums up above there. And I bought the Ridgeview condominium, so I own both sides of that. And so I can now actually get rid of that dead easement.
Okay. Thanks.
I believe all of the existing mains, by the way, are within right of way. So they wouldn't need easements per se. And there are services stubbed out to the properties already.
That is correct.
Looks like the amended plat only has that, it's the water easement running through there, has the water easement terminating at the roundabout. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what my GIS information shows. And so it's a bit redundant if on the assumption that that's a right of way on the road as well. It's a right of way and an easement. But maybe Mr. Musso or Mr. Colin can elaborate on the right of way aspect.
I don't know enough on the right of way for the HOA side of things, but I don't know, Stuart, do you have any comment?
Yes, there's an existing easement agreements for both access and all utility agreements. There's cross easements that are allowed. There was an agreement that was entered into when the parcel 2 was split into the 2A and 2B that allows both sides to have access and also for utilities.
Perfect, thank you.
Member Mahoney.
I have a question on, maybe it's just syntax. These drawings here, they're called, well, the one we're looking at right now is called a site map, but it's been referred to as a plat. The site map identifies these envelopes as single family envelopes, lettered A through F. The map also shows duplex building areas, and they have alpha designations as well. Is the intent that these single family envelopes, the shape I heard was described as not changing, is the intent to allow any change of ownership on one or either side of the duplexes, or no? I mean, can two different people own 2 halves of the duplex?
Okay.
Of the existing ones or the new ones to be built?
I was thinking specifically on the new ones.
The new ones will be owned by the Stanley Hotel. There's no HOA. There's no separation between the two.
Okay.
They're basically giant hotel rooms.
So I question, maybe this is a question for Attorney Kramer, but is there a need to replat? We're not dividing those. All we're doing is changing the use designation. In my training, that's not a platting process. That's just a land use process. So is there a plat that's necessary for this?
Member Mahana, my understanding from Senior Planner Wober is that the plat itself says that it's a single family building envelope. So that's a restriction built into the plat. And in order to change that, we would need a replat.
I heard those words previously, but I've not seen a document shown in this packet titled plat. And what I see here is site maps. So that's why it's just a syntax question. Maybe back in the day, this site map was recorded as a plat with this land use designation on these envelopes. And so we're following that form maybe and changing the land use designations from single family envelope to duplex building areas?
I might be able to answer that one. In the history of the Overlook there, when it was developed, there were actually four different plats that were done originally as each one of the different sections of the condominiums were developed. And so what you're seeing is was one of the later ones that came in. And all four of those maps, the plats actually had those single family envelopes on them designated as single family.
So,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver, am I understanding right that you do interpret those as plats?
I do interpret those as plats and they were recorded as such. So I think it would be wise to go ahead just to clean it up as to call it a plat and to get it approved.
Thank you for that clarification. That helps.
Member Wisniewski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I look at the for parcel 2, it's not clear if there's a restriction on the allowable development area for residential units. So, for example, if there were 46 residential units, the square footage could be unlimited. Is that an accurate interpretation?
By the written definitions within the Historic District Master Plan, that is correct. There is no square footage maximum for residential. There is a number of residential units themselves that is capped, but not square footage.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
It wouldn't be the first hole in this document.
No, it wouldn't. Would not.
This may be for Attorney Kramer.
Thank you, Chair Mahalik. I wanted to ask a question about process, and this is primarily, I suppose, for Senior Planner Wober. But the master plan requires TRC review for development. Was there previously approval of the single family development? And once there's a preliminary package in place, would that have to come back to TRC?
Attorney Craner, I wasn't thinking it would. I spent literally a few hours going through the previous files from 2003 for the TRC for these plats and so forth, and it just wasn't very clear how they did this. They did a development plan for the entire lot 2, and it appeared that they took the plat, first the plat to create 1 and 2, and then the Overlook Condominium condo map to the TRC and to the town board for approval. So I was just kind of following suit with what had been done previously. I don't think when they developed the 6 duplexes, the 12 units, we would expect to see some kind of a development plan at that time. And I think it's safe to say that we probably should bring it back to the TRC. You know, that would identify things like landscaping and possibly drainage and so forth.
In other words, while a plat ultimately needs to be approved by the town board, that doesn't take the place of approval by the TRC for development on the Stanley historic properties. So this would be one step in a multi-step process.
I think that's right.
So the other thing I want to point out is that this could be done, the increase above the understood maximum on square footage and number of units, that could in theory be done as a minor modification. We could talk about that. It could also be done as a variance request that comes back before the TRC at the time that the TRC is considering, excuse me, the preliminary package.
My understanding of this is under the development agreement. Is the development agreement actually allows the staff to do that. The TRC does not grant the variances. The staff does under the development agreement.
Mr. Olive, I do understand the minor modification provision of the development agreement. And I'm just pulling that up right now. Section 4.02. There's also a process for what's called a variance at the bottom of page 4 of the master plan. The technical review committee has the right by majority vote to grant variances or modify the guidelines based on the applicant's ability to demonstrate innovative approaches. Although that does not allow a variance to the permitted uses or density or square footage in a development parcel. Similarly, minor modifications would not be able to change the chart on Exhibit F at the bottom of the master plan. So I bring that up only because that would be something we'd have to work through at a future date. Making a recommendation of approval of a plat doesn't change any of those provisions.
It doesn't change those provisions, I agree. However, what it does on this thing is that it's the way the documents are written, and as Mr. Cohen pointed out, it's not the first hole in the documents. It's actually the staff can approve the minor change. The TRC doesn't do that the way the documents are written. Don't ask me why.
I'm seeing two potential processes there. One that could be done by staff if it's within their authority under that development agreement. But that's not a decision that's being made today in any case.
That sort of leads into my question, that the square footage, all that element is kind of, we're not creating square footage descriptions here. We're changing this single family envelope. The request is to change that to a duplex envelope. And the size of those duplexes is not really at discussion today unless we want to make it a discussion today, right? We're not putting a square footage on the plat. We're saying that instead of having single family envelopes on there, we want to list these as duplexes, and the rest of the other stuff is a separate process. Am I missing something here?
No, I agree with you, Travis. I think it's just as simple as we're just changing single family inside the same envelope, same space, and just making it accommodations as part of the Stanley.
That's correct.
So it's also correct in saying that there will be no square footage designations on that plat when it goes to the town board.
A plat is a plat, not a building plan.
Correct. You're correct. It will only have the platted lot lines, not the building information.
Understood. Thank you. Member Wisniewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So because so much of this discussion is hinging on whether this is a single family residence or an accommodation, if the existing single family residences were acquired by the hotel, it would change all the math again, right? Is that an accurate assumption?
Which side are you talking about? Talking about the existing units?
Yeah, the existing 8 residences, if the hotel were to acquire those and then convert them into accommodations, all the geometry changes, or the algebra changes again, because we're changing it from a single family residence to an accommodation residence. Is that a fair assessment? And the inverse, right? If you were to sell some of the accommodations off to make them permanent residents, it would change the algebra again.
Well, let me give you some of the history. I've spent the last 15 years buying majority control of those units, and we're not selling any units to ever become this Overlook is a part of the Stanley. It's not a housing development like Findlay Court or Mountain Creek condominiums. It is part of the actual real accommodation play here. And I am going to probably sell off condominiums in the next 2 years or so, but they will be deed restricted as part of the Stanley rental pool.
Yeah, and Mr. Wisniewski, as John described a little earlier in the conversation, changing the math. So should there be a desire at any point in the future to change from accommodations to residential or vice versa, the math has to be redone again as permits for accommodations are presented to the town. So it could happen as long as the math works within the requirements for, number of residential and number of accommodations and square footage of accommodations. But it's not likely to happen as Mr. Cullen describes. He has control of all these and they will remain as accommodations as part of the Stanley.
Yeah, thank you. It shines the light on some of the giant holes that are in the document, right? And so,
Mike, I will tell you that as God is my witness, I'm going to finish developing the Stanley and burn this TRC document and rejoin the town. And that is on the topic for this year. There will be another TRC meeting with the final master plan, and with that, probably ends the TRC historic district and rejoins the town.
I think a lot of people will be in support of that.
I am DONE with the TRC. I like you guys, but this document is so fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I offer it in the context of if there's a potential variance or administrative modification for 1,776 square feet. And that's why I just kind of put my hands up and say, so what? So I offer that for future consideration because of the way this algebra works out. Changing a single family residence plat to a duplex plat, let's keep it focused on that. And then the rest of it will shake out later, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions additionally before we head to public comment? All right, well, I will open the public comment period. Anyone wishing to make a comment, please click the raise hand button or press *9 and follow the prompts. When you are announced, please state your name and address for the record. We'll give folks a chance to raise their hand if they would like to make public comment on this item. It'll be 5 minutes. Saw a hand go up and then go down. It looks like we have one interested party. Mr. Mayo, you've been promoted, and please state your name and address for the record. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comment.
Gerald Mayo, and I live at 265 Lookout Street in Estes Park. We also own 320 Overlook Court. I'm also president of the Overlook Homeowners Association, and we all support the change.
Gerald, you have 4 minutes and 50 more seconds if you'd like that. Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? All right, seeing no hands, we will move out of the public comment session and back to the action item. Again, you have a motion in your packet. Just recall, we are really focusing this on the amended plat at this point. So with that, if there's any other questions, otherwise I would entertain a motion.
Yeah, this is Mike Wisniewski. I don't see a formal resolution in here, but I do move forward a recommendation of approval to the Town Board of Trustees for the amended plat of the Overlook Condominiums.
I'll second that.
And just for clarity, that amended plat would change 6 lots currently designated as single family to duplex. I will offer that as a friendly amendment to the motion.
Accepted, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, Mr. Gagnon.
Yes.
Recording Secretary Swanman, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Mahalik,
Aye.
Member Gagnon,
Aye.
Member Hinkle,
Aye.
Member Mahonen,
Aye.
and Member Wisniewski.
Aye.
And that passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, we have one item left on our agenda. That's a discussion item regarding upcoming potential TRC meetings. Director Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as Mr. Cullen alluded to, we may likely expect to have another visit to TRC later on this year to talk about the overall master plan. In addition to that, I think we are also in discussions with Mr. Cullen about potentially relocating the entrance into the Stanley. So we are still awaiting a submittal on that, but I anticipate that we will, if appropriate, we'll bring it back to the TRC later on within the next few months. And that's pretty much, I think, what I have on my agenda. Mr. Cullen or Mr. Musso, if you'd like to add to that, please feel free.
We're running out of projects.
It's not a bad thing. This is a great time to inherit the Stanley, for at least on my part. So no further updates. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Hearing nothing else to come before the committee, we'll consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Best wishes, Mr. Cullen.
participation.
Cheers, everybody.